Welcome to Tokyo Wave, recorded in a live studio in Harajuku, Japan, with your hosts Aaron and Parker. Alright everyone, welcome to episode 139 of Tokyo Wave. We're your hosts, Aaron Randall
and Parker Allen. On Tokyo Wave, we bring you weekly updates from our studio in Harajuku.
Join us in segments featuring this week's top news,
political happenings,
business,
and other random garbage.
To get us started, here are this week's top news highlights.
Japan Prime Minister resigns as ruling party faction head amid fund scandal.
Host clubs in Tokyo nightlife district to stop running up huge customer tabs by next April.
Tokyo taxi driver arrested for allegedly running over a pigeon.
This week in Japan. Alright, so our first story. Japan Prime Minister resigns as ruling party faction head amid fund scandal.
Kyodo News has reported that Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida said on December 7th that he decided to step down as chief of his faction in the ruling Liberal Democratic Party, with its political fund scandal taking a further toll on his already flagging government.
The LDP has recently faced criticism amid allegations that 5 factions, including Kishida's, underreported their revenue from political fundraising parties, from which the extra income may have been returned to some lawmakers as kickbacks.
While Kishida's predecessors typically resigned as leaders of their factions during their terms as prime minister, to avoid the appearance of patronage-driven politics, he retained the position since assuming office as prime minister in October 2021.
Kishida, who heads the 4th largest faction within the LDP, told reporters, "I will take the lead in the party's political responsibilities and efforts to restore public trust."
Kishida added that he will depart from his faction while he serves as premier, with sources close to him saying the group's leadership position will be vacant for the time being.
LDP factions have typically supplied their members with election funding and recommended them for ministerial posts. Around 80% of more than 370 LDP lawmakers have belonged to one of the factions.
And so, if you're not familiar with LDP factions, there are about 6 major factions which constitute, as we just mentioned, around 80% of LDP lawmakers in the upper house and lower house. And these factions are extremely powerful, and they have political fundraisers, not for individual members, but actually for the faction as a whole. And so the issue here is that these big faction parties, which sometimes draw crowds of over 1,000 people, were not being reported on in the proper way. And this leads to the scandal that we have. So these faction parties provided many LDP lawmakers with opportunities to generate so-called secret funds, which critics have said that it is difficult to trace how exactly they receive money from these faction groups and how they use it.
Wow, jeez. So, Parker, who's in charge now?
Well, so Kishida hasn't resigned as prime minister. He's just resigned as the head of his faction called the Kishida faction.
Okay.
And so while he's still prime minister, he will not serve as the head of the 4th largest faction in the LDP.
Okay. That differential is important, I think, to actually understand what's going on.
I actually saw the news article, like, Prime Minister resigns? I didn't know this.
Yeah, even as we were talking through it, I'm like, wait, who's the next guy in line then, you know?
No. So he hasn't resigned as prime minister, but he has resigned as the head of his faction.
Do you think this will lead to a situation where he's going to resign as prime minister eventually?
It could. I mean, lots of people are starting to wonder how much longer he will be in power with his government being increasingly unpopular, and people within the LDP also are starting to criticize his policies and his actions more severely, which could lead to a situation where he no longer has the confidence required to stay on as prime minister.
Right. Makes sense. Yeah, he's lost, his supporting group now too, right? The faction.
Yes, and it's not just that. So the Tokyo District Public Prosecutor's Office's Special Investigation Squad is investigating these faction parties, and Kishida actually instructed LDP executives to refrain from hosting fundraising parties in the interim.
Wow.
That doesn't sound good.
Sounds like there's a lot of dirty money maybe floating around.
Yeah, not good news for the LDP, and very not good news for Prime Minister Kishida.
Wow. We'll have to see what happens next then.
So up next, host clubs in Tokyo nightlife district to stop running up huge customer tabs by next April.
The Mainichi has reported that host clubs in Tokyo's Kabukicho Entertainment District will end a widely practiced system of running up tabs for female patrons at their establishments by next April. It was announced on December 5th following talks between business groups and the Shinjuku ward government.
This change is aimed at addressing the charging of sums beyond patrons' means by malicious clubs, forcing the customers to take on large debts. The operators and others announced their intent to abolish this business practice, which the parties recognize has become normalized over the years at the clubs, which offer entertainment with male companions known as hosts. As the first publicly announced measure to tackle the problem, those involved will closely watch effectiveness.
The talks were attended by parties including 13 host club operators. Takayuki Makita, chief operating officer of the largest group, commented, "On behalf of the industry, I apologize for the inappropriate state of affairs." Makita clarified the groups will take gradual steps to abolish the practice from January 2024, saying, "We won't do business in a way that ruins lives." Additionally, the operators will by next April self-enforce a rule limiting charges to what is paid on the spot. As well, the clubs will end the practice of individual hosts shouldering customers' debts.
Other measures decided on include refusing entry to customers under 20 years old, limiting charges for patrons who are students, and ending the club's connections with so-called scouts who introduce women to host clubs and related sex businesses. Dates were not determined for these measures, but the operators of 18 groups in total, including those not present at the conference, will form an industry group and reportedly move forward with discussions.
So I think, something interesting here. They're going to stop the practice of shouldering customers' debts.
And you know what this means? So basically, what would happen is a female patron would run up a huge tab, and the host would shoulder that debt, but in exchange, charge an exorbitant interest rate or force the patron into some kind of prostitution so that she can pay back the debt. And so these hosts were becoming pimps.
Yeah, that's exactly what it kind of turns into. And yeah, as you said, it kind of funnels women into this kind of industry, right? It's a very endless negative feedback loop going on.
Yeah, and I don't really understand how these host clubs became so popular or why they're so kind of really the talk of the town in the nightlife world. I mean, it used to be, the hostess clubs, which of course male patrons go to talk to, women, hostesses.
Yeah.
I think traditionally this was the more often embarked upon route other than women going to these host clubs. But the hostess clubs are surprisingly absent from the conversation. And it might be strictly due to their scale. I mean, if you go around Shinjuku at night, you're going to see all of these loud trucks that have all of these, really pretty looking hosts on them and sort of advertising these individual host clubs. And they would even sort of promote that this host makes $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
I was like, I wonder how he's doing that.
Yeah. Gosh, I've heard so many crazy stories about this. Maybe, I don't know if our listeners or you've heard about the Itaraki Joshi, this girl who stole, a bunch of money from all these Japanese guys on dating websites. She was making, I think, $400K a month at her peak. But she used all the money at host clubs. So she doesn't have any of that money. She would just go there with, hundreds of thousands of dollars and just bam, put it on the table. It's almost like a casino.
That's ridiculous. So she swindled all this money from guys and then spent it all enjoying the company of guys.
Yeah. It's very ironic, but also just kind of wild how, in Japan, people go there to dump a lot of money.
No, it's really insane to think about, and it's really something that is specific to Japan. You really don't see this sort of thing happening in other countries.
No. This would be illegal or would have to be regulated, somewhere else. Is it because it's just not regulated at all? This is the first step in kind of...
Yeah, I mean, it's really the Wild West out there, and these clubs have been able to promote themselves and sort of put themselves in front of this wide audience of people who fall victim to these really malicious practices.
Yeah.
My question is, can they actually self-regulate? Because, I mean, these clubs thrive on exploitation.
Yeah.
So to say that they're not going to exploit people anymore sounds like, I don't know if you can self-regulate that, because that's what your entire business model is.
They don't even know what self-regulation means,
Well, they're about to find out. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. All right, and up next, Tokyo taxi driver arrested for allegedly running over pigeon.
So according to the Mainichi, a taxi driver has been arrested after allegedly running over a pigeon and killing it. This was announced by Tokyo police on December the 5th.
The cab driver, Atsushi Ozawa, 50-year-old, of Tokyo's Nakano ward is suspected of violating the wildlife protection law by striking a flock of pigeons and driving off, killing one of them on a street in Tokyo's Shinjuku ward at around 1 p.m. on November 13th.
According to the Metropolitan Police Department's Shinjuku Police Station, the taxi reportedly had no passengers at the time and quickly accelerated right after the light changed to green, striking the pigeons. A passerby in her 50s who witnessed the incident called him out, to which Ozawa replied by saying things like, "Pigeons should get out of the way," and he then drove away from the scene.
The suspect has reportedly admitted to the allegations, stating, "Roads are for people. It's up to the pigeons to avoid cars."
I first heard this story and I was like, I didn't know you could get arrested for hitting a pigeon.
Yeah, me either.
Then also, I mean, if you hit one accidentally, big whoops, but it sounds like he hit the pigeons intentionally. And you gotta think, why is a taxi driver gonna go out of his way to kill a pigeon with his car?
He's digging his own grave. I mean, he's talking about how the pigeons need to avoid cars. He should just lie and be like, oops, that was an accident.
Yeah, big oops.
Oh my god. But the taxi drivers, man, are fucking crazy, dude. I've been in some cars recently. And,
I saw one taxi driver on YouTube or something where he's like slamming up and down in his seat. Do you see that one? It's like, is he trying to stay awake? Is he insane?
Yeah.
Both. It's kind of scary when you think about it, because, when you get in one of these taxis, I think in Japan, you sort of expect everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
But you have a real sort of spectrum of good drivers, bad drivers, drivers with strange habits, drivers who talk your ear off, and some drivers who just are totally inexperienced and end up taking you to the wrong place or making you go down the wrong route.
Oh yeah, dude, I mean, we were just talking about regulation. There's probably, some type of regulation in the taxi industry, but as far as drivers are concerned, I mean, I've called and made some complaints after some very scary taxi rides. Like, I've had to tell the taxi drivers, please slow down. Like, I don't want to die, constantly slamming on the brakes. Some of them don't have GPS. Have you run into the thing where they have the paper map and they refuse? I was trying to go back to my spot, and I'm like, okay, you take a right here. He's like, no, wait, I have to check. And I'm like, dude, I live here. It's a right, But he refused. He wanted to use his paper map with a flashlight, and he had no GPS system or anything. So
wow, I've not seen that recently, but yeah. I mean, I'll see the exact opposite, where the driver will literally like 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, punch in the exact address into his GPS and follow it like to a T. And it's like, I thought you were supposed to be a professional at this, you know? Don't you have like a little bit of knowledge about the area that you're going to go to?
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's like punches it in like, you know, we would. And it's like, I thought there was supposed to be some professionalism in this business.
Yeah, they've got that. And then there's a lot of drivers too that have like, they'll have like 4 screens. You know what I mean?
Oh,
like,
yeah. It's like super distracting.
It's like, yeah, which one are you looking at, dude? And oh my gosh, I've actually tried to avoid taxis recently just because I've had some really scary rides that literally like gave me a fucking panic attack.
Yeah, no, seriously. I think something needs to be done to raise the bar because taxis in Japan aren't cheap.
No.
They're pretty expensive.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I think people who ride these taxis expect a certain level of service. And recently, it just seems like the bar just keeps on going lower and lower. And, you know, they need to do something about it because it's going to ruin the reputation of taxis. And like you and me, it's going to create more people who don't want to get in a taxi because they don't want to deal with added stress, even though riding in a taxi is supposed to be something that alleviates stress.
Yeah, and you know, most, as you said, it's expensive. You use a taxi when you're trying to get somewhere fast, right? And like you're buying time. And oh my God, so many times, like as soon as I get in, even after I give them the address they put in the GPS, they'll start asking me like, you know, just do like 20 questions about the location. And I'm just like, dude, just like get on the highway, man. Like, do you know where the highway entrance is? You know?
Wait a second, let me look on the map with my flashlight.
Dude, that, oh my God. I just wanted to jump out of the car.
Yeah. So up next on Tokyo Panic Room, we're going to be talking about synthetic cannabis, specifically the cannabinoid chemical HHCH, which is now banned in Japan.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Tokyo Wave.
Tokyo Panic Room. A Japanese health ministry panel decided to ban HHCH, a synthetic cannabinoid, from December 2nd after many people who consumed gummies containing the compound had to go to the hospital.
So this so-called legal weed, or hexahydrocannabis hexol, will be added to the list of illicit drugs in Japan, which encompasses possession, use, and distribution.
That's a cool name, I gotta say. Hexahydrocannabis hexol.
HHCH.
Currently, HHCH is not banned in Japan, although the substance has structures similar to THC, or tetrahydrocannabinol, which is derived from cannabis and already prohibited in the country.
The Ministry of Health, Labor, and Welfare is also considering banning all substances with chemical structures similar to HHCH.
On November 4th, 5 individuals ranging in age from their teens to their 50s fell ill after consuming gummies and packages labeled HHCH distributed by a man at a festival in western Tokyo, according to investigative sources.
So this dude literally went around and was like, eat this, it'll make the music sound better. And what I want to know is, why did this dude go out of his way to pass these out? Like, he wasn't even charging for it. He was just passing them out for free to unsuspecting people to get them messed up. And it's like, what was the motive behind this? It's sort of unclear.
It sounds very hippie-ish, you know, spreading the happiness around.
Yeah, but unfortunately, that's not what resulted in. Following similar cases, the Health Ministry's Narcotics Control Department conducted on-site inspections at the manufacturer of the gummies and stores selling them in Tokyo and Osaka, and detected HHCH in some of their products.
So people who ate a product called HHCH gummies became ill? Why is that exactly?
So it is because these gummies contained a substance similar to the one in weed, marijuana. Cannabis belongs to a botanical family named Cannabisidae. Cannabisaceae? Cannabisaceae?
Cannabourgeois.
cannabijois, which is illegal in Japan, and it affects the brain.
What kind of substances are they really?
So marijuana contains ingredients collectively known as cannabinoids, and one typical harmful substance is THC, or tetrahydrocannabinol. A synthetic compound with a structure similar to THC, this HHCH, or hexahydrocannabishexol, was found in the gummy products. This compound is believed to have been created synthetically, and the manufacture and sale of products containing it had previously not been prohibited by law.
So, like, how does this affect the body, really?
So, taking THC produces a feeling of euphoria, and large doses can cause nausea, hallucinations, and an uncontrollable desire to eat potato chips. Masahiko Funada, professor of psychopharmacology at the Shonan University of Medical Sciences, believes that HHCH has similar effects to marijuana.
So how dangerous is it?
There have been a number of cases across Japan where people have been taken to emergency rooms after eating products believed to contain HHCH. As a result, the Ministry of Health, Labor, and Welfare added HHCH to the list of designated drugs under the Pharmaceuticals and Medical Devices Law and has banned its sale and possession since December the 2nd. And this was after extensive testing by the Ministry of Health, which included lots of trips to the convenience store.
So, Parker, are we safe now?
Not quite. Funada, the health expert, points out the danger that if products contain ingredients similar to HHCH, they could be distributed without safety checks. In order to prevent health hazards, the health ministry intends to regulate similar substances together as early as January 2024 under the comprehensive designation system of the Pharmaceuticals and Medical Devices Law.
You know what, Parker? I'm glad they're getting rid of this. I hate the synthetic stuff because this happened back in Florida when weed was illegal. They had all this, maybe you've experienced this too. I don't know if they had this in Tennessee. They had a bunch of like synthetic crap that was not real weed, and it had really messed up side effects.
Yeah, I remember people were like smoking bath salts and whatnot.
That was a different thing. But they were legit, like I forget what they were selling it as, like fragrances or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
like selling it as some random product, but everybody knew it was just like synthetic, made in a lab marijuana.
Yeah, and it's just like you don't know what you're taking, and yeah. I think that the fact that all of these, were existing outside of any legal framework is just sort of a testament to the uncertain nature of these products. And while, people are always going to want to gravitate towards these things because they can get high, it's sort of dangerous. I mean, you're really kind of rolling the dice when you imbibe in one of these unknown created in a lab substances.
Yeah. I mean, medical marijuana is good to go in Shibuya, right? If you you have to go. I know it's like insane to get approved.
No, I think it's they're talking about allowing it, and that would be a nationwide thing, but there hasn't been any decision made as of now.
Probably no one wants to be the person behind that, pushing that decision forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's been proven to help people with like Parkinson's disease, which is very serious.
Yeah.
And, it could end up being a miracle drug for some people. But Japan, since the post-war era, has had a very heavy-handed approach on anything marijuana. So it remains to be seen whether they will actually move to deregulate medical marijuana.
They used to grow marijuana here, right? Like before World War II, like 20 years before World War II or something.
So funny story. The consumption and production of marijuana was completely unregulated until the 1950s.
Oh.
And what happened was, in the early post-war era, methamphetamine, which was produced by the Imperial Japanese forces to jolt people up and
stim packs.
Yeah, and get them sort of hyped up to do things like becoming kamikaze pilots, that flooded onto the black market after World War II. And there were all of these people doing methamphetamine and all over the streets, and just it was a total mess.
Whoa.
So the occupation forces moved to do a blanket ban on all drugs that have been considered illegal in the United States. And on that list, obviously, was marijuana.
So it's the Americans' fault that we don't have marijuana legal.
Pretty much.
Gotcha. That's I didn't know the thing about the methamphetamines, but that's what the Nazis were using too, right? Something similar.
Yeah.
To when they were invading France.
Exactly.
And because everyone was like, how the hell did they cover this much land in France? Because they weren't sleeping, and they were just like, taking basically like what, crack cocaine or
drugs. Drugs are the answer.
Strong drugs. Yeah. Crazy stuff. It's ironic how Americans are the ones who stopped it in Japan. Yeah.
And it's really ironic because if you think about it, America is the #1 world market for illegal drugs.
That's a very good point.
It is definitely an example of a little bit of good old American hypocrisy.
Yeah. Everybody wants to sell in America, man. I was watching a documentary on San Francisco. They've got like gangs from Honduras coming up through Mexico, and like they're smuggling gang members to get them in the streets of San Francisco so they can actually sell product, you know?
That's nuts.
It's crazy, man. Yeah, America.
Yeah, it's relatively like, people, getting high on this strange synthetic weed and going to the emergency room because they're freaking out, man.
Yeah.
Seems relatively safe compared to what we see in the United States with Florida man after Florida man fighting off the heads of bats.
It's fentanyl. Everyone is doing fentanyl now. And yeah, the problem too is is synthetic fentanyl. There's the fentanyl from the Chinese companies that comes to big pharma, and then the cartels are making their own synthetic fentanyl. And those are the guys who are using the sellers from Honduras to try to bring up the product into, California and Florida,
Crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Hey, listeners, that's right. You listener right there.
Who do you think should be our next guest on Tokyo Wave? Let us know. Drop us a line at wave@tokyowave.jp.
We hope you enjoyed Tokyo Wave.
If you haven't already, you can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube.
Join us again next week on Tokyo Wave.